My coach.
Okay, so I got the live stream up. I mean, I guess, you know, mute it or whatever. Or show. I just take it over and show the kids. Can I turn it this way? Yeah. Well, there's nothing really there.
It's just
Huh? Oh yeah, no, it's live streaming actually. Just gotta have a dance party. Yes. Oh boy. Now you're on to me.
How long are we going to be in this?
I don't know. Ask Adrian. It's his show. You should maybe, you know what you can do? Maybe you can find somebody who's hacking on something.
Yeah.
You know what we should do?
Does he want you to do? Are we doing this
Oh,
till
you know what?
7:30?
Oh, I thought he was doing the exercise. Yeah, you got it.
I'm going to bring it inside so we can do this activity.
Good sense, sure.
Okay, let me go get it. It's going to take me a minute.
Hey,
So long.
I don't know what the easy way.
you know what?
Okay, hold on. I'll be right back. I'll be right back.
Honey is remarkable. Hold on. Awesome stuff.
No, keep, yeah, you just keep the last. But hey, well, actually, you know, I can play too. So you gotta just remember.
You got it. Okay.
So you're on push 50. then I don't think it's ever coming back. I thought I would at least look at the exercise. Well, maybe I should start reloading this page. It's sitting here so. Hey! Oh no, it took me back to.
So I own this first one, and I decided to run on my own computer as well. Okay. Where did I put it?
Where do you put it?
Was I ran Docker or whatever in Little World? Did it actually download and store it somewhere, or did it just play with the Docker
In this-
around this?
In this window?
No, I did it on my own computer.
Yeah, I had probably you don't know what happened, but I guess it cleared the buffer too.
Well, the image would still be present. If you were running an interactive mode, the container would be still. So Docker PS -A is going to show you this like this. So let me do that, right? So let's say Docker run interactive terminal.
Yeah, you can.
So it's downloading base image.
I'm going to grab my laptop.
You're good. You're obviously young.
So now I'm in it. Now I'm
Now
in
you're
it.
in there.
You know, if I don't have a
Exit
full
the container. I'm back where I started, right? So if I do Docker PS right now, nothing's there. But if I do -A, there's a container that's sitting in 11 seconds. Now if I want to get rid of the container, I say Docker RM. LS.
Oh, wait.
Image LS is the same thing as Docker images. So it's showing the image CentOS 6 is what I ran. That's its ID. And this is the container. So there's two things there, right? So if I want to get rid of the container and leave the image there, I would say Docker RM. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. And you only have to run enough of it for it to be unique. So now if I do the same LS -A, PS -A, nothing there. Right? But Docker images, the image is still there. Right? So if I start another one, what's going to happen? Is it going to re-download that base image? No, it's just going to exit.
So memory. So even when you disconnect from the Docker, it's still.
No, it's not in memory. It's in the kernel as a namespace, but it's not loaded in memory.
Got it.
So it's kind of like, like when you're not reading a file and it's waiting on the hypervisor. And if you say create a socket, and you're not talking on the socket.
So if you just kind of blindly went ahead and started downloading on the screen or kernel until you kind of go things up.
The PS, yes, this list. Like if I run a second one, do the same thing again, and I exit it. You see now, I've got two of them labeled. So I've got two different sets of reattached one. Yes. Attach. 6D. Okay, so I need to do a start. Hold on. I do a Docker start on 16. And I do a Docker attach 6D. Now I've got active. So I don't know what you did, but you guys come back. If you look at the list again, you'll see it was 35 seconds that it was created, but it just exited. So these things can be redone and reused again and again.
Is it typical that you
Yeah, so
lots of companies are learning that.
There's nothing-
Lots of them come in.
yeah, definitely. So if I say Docker run 2, download all that. DockerLS. Container. Yeah, the funky CentOS and when you look at Docker images, there's nothing that happens when you build your own. So if I say, what? What about? How can you do that? You don't have it in the background. Yeah, I have it.
These are all running in your virtual machine, giving you the web.
And the thing ultimately is
Also be apply all the same things.
chop it out. So now what I'm doing is I'm building my own Docker image based on this Docker file. And now if I do a Docker image, see this one is just created, but there's no tag on it. It's just a none. So now I can say Docker run.
Good.
387.
Check it out. I gotta get a picture of it.
Oh, if I name it, I can name it. So let's do it again. This time I'm just going to give it a name.
You put that in that.
No, the build, the name of the image. So I can tag the image or I can name the container. So if I tag the image, let's have the image listed. So let's say Docker tag 3837. I think now that's fufu related. But the name of it is fufu. Right now I can say, all right, tag that as fufu v1. Now if you do Docker images, you're going to see there's fufu v1, and there's also fufu related. They're actually the same ID. See, so I've got two tags. They're basically two ways to affect that same one. Now, if I build a new one, let's update my my build. Right. So if I say,
What I have to write, my name and surname? Or
You can write my name.
your first and last name.
Just copy what's on that card.
Yeah. Okay, so now, what are they doing? They're doing Docker build -t v2. V2. Okay, so now you do Docker images. And we've got three versions of this. We've got V1, V2, and latest. So if I actually change something about Docker, okay, so I've actually changed the metadata in the image. So if I rebuild it now as V3, it's actually going to build a new one.
Yeah, the other was all point the same.
Exactly. Nothing changed. Right. And now, if I do, so that version 1, version 2, and version 3. Right.
Is a lot of this accessible from the Docker map menu?
Yeah. Actually, Docker map. And
Install it.
that allows you to run.
Yeah, so
lightweight,
here, during the meetup group, right? Check this out.
As if there was a virtual machine. So it's actually a Linux
execution environment within your
And here's the meetup group, right? You remember this, right?
That one in particular, I don't
You
think
should
so.
do that's my meetup group,
So
right?
right from
You-
so,
This
so in
here.
that case, your Docker
Okay, I'll join.
But here, in there's the link. There it is right there.
yeah, I mean, I like using this because when I'm done, it's gone and I've left no
Can you
message.
hear the music?
Good idea. Okay. Thank you much.
Well, another thing you can do is play with Docker. Watch this.
Jordan? Can you hear the music?
It's pretty awesome.
The
No,
background music?
actually not at all. No.
Excellent.
Just hear me yelling at you.
So now you can create your own instances. 24-hour playtime. So let's say create another instance. So now I've got 2, right? Let's make it 3. So that's 3. Network these together. Let's say listen to this. Okay, now it gives me this command, right? For how to join this one. So I can go to my node 2. So that was node 3. Node 2, I run this.
Oh, it's a little dance for me.
But anyway, what I've done, you see here there's a master
Okay.
and there's 2 slaves. So now when you run your Docker commands, they can run anywhere in the cluster. It's pretty sweet.
And they share the same resource space, so they would understand.
No, each node is independent. But
So they
if
have
you're
to
using
connect into a backend like a database to share.
yeah. But, yeah, if you use the
You could run Nginx on each one of them, for example.
balance. In fact, there's balancing all built into this one.
More people use it.
I don't know about it yet. Pretty awesome.
Yeah. So back to basics for me.
All right.
Thank you very much.
All right, what can I do?
So we try to stay on local private industry, so we don't know if they have decided to
I run mine outside of Kubernetes, and I use the restart policy to set reset to always. So each time I upgrade Docker or reboot the host, the registry comes back. So this is one thing I'm going to be talking about in the best practice pattern later in the advanced session. But the idea here is every host that you run container on, you run a registry 2 container. And you backend it on either EC2 or cloud files, or if you have your own private cloud, but your own Swift cluster or whatever. Okay. So there's one state that has actually all the container binary images in it, but you have access to it from every one of the nodes using a local image space. So when you run the container, you call it localhost :5000/name, no matter what host you access it from. And you never have the client pulling the container binary over the net directly. You have it going through the registry. service to be pulling it off of the storage.
So then you mean the register have to be outside and set it up somehow inside as in the pod still kind of?
So here's an example of what that looks like.
We was looking at on that one, the local host 5,000, something like that. So pod just call that to grab the registry, actually fill plus.
Too many choices.
So you see how there's a container here called registry 2? And it's
Maybe
running
you're
on
the
localhost 5,000, and it's named registry. Here's how I got that.
Take a knee.
So I said, I created, this is using Rackspace as a backend, Rackspace Cloud Files, right? I created a username and a password for an account that only has access to Cloud Files, doesn't have access to any other cloud services. Okay. Then I say, run the registry, okay, locally on 5,000, and use those credentials.
To go to the connect to my private repository.
My private repository. So on every host that I run this on, I can access images using that.
And these are basically on the top.
Yes. So in your pod description, when you specify the image name, you have localhost 5,000 as the prefix to the image name. So you get private registry everywhere. And then you don't need to worry about securing that, right? Because the back end is already secure through the storage program. And it's already distributed.
Yeah, it's secure from there.
So just imagine that there's a lot of chatter going on between this host and the storage backend, right? The cloud is already scaling out the storage with a lot of replicas of the storage. So I'm going to get the parallel read benefit of running it on the cloud storage backend, which I'm not going to get if I run my own registry. If I just run my own singular centralized registry with a file system backend, that's not going to scale out when you've got a lot of activity, right? Whereas if you're doing it this way, you're going to scale out across all of the cluster capacity in the cloud storage system.
Yeah, I see. No, I'm just looking something. Is this actually documentation somewhere available for that? To sort of download the script from the
This one. Getkarina.com/docs tutorials registry on cloud files. Follow those directions.
so basically two multi-region clusters. One is going to be in the west and one is going to be in the east. So, so for sharing the storage, Docker have to use those information to do that. For example, we have an engine server, MySQL server, and we want to share those storage, the same storage with the east and west. I don't want to use NFS because NFS is going to be in the one location. It's going to latency to get to that storage, so it's kind of not right. I was trying to take a look on the EC2, like they call it EBS, cloud storage. That's not going to work too because that's going to make us exactly for one region, and other region will see. So I don't see if there is anything to Docker can do that to just.
This product does that. Ceph as a distributed object store can do that. set as a distributed block store. You can also do that, but you only one of them is active in the file. You can have multiple readers, but you can only have a single writer. So depending on how your application is architected, that might be okay if you only have readers in foreign geography, but you have writers in the local geography. Otherwise, you need to use something like that. It's called Converge. It's an LA based.
So that's probably going to fix that problem, which is the file container can use one storage, like 10 services as an engineers can use the same storage across the region. But so that's going to do like one storage in this region and another storage in another region and duplicate it together.
It uses a quorum on the right to accomplish that. But you got to recognize if you allow them to write, then
if I give it
rights have to be quorumed, which means you've got to get an ACK from a minimum of 51% of the participants for every single write. So every time your app calls FC, you've got to get an ACK back from 51% of the cluster. So if your cluster is small and it's in one geography, that's going to be great. But if your cluster is huge and it's in multiple geographies, that's going to suck, no matter what. And there's no magic physics that solves that problem. See what I'm saying? Either you're using storage that's eventually consistent, or you're consistent and replicated, but writes are slow.
Or regionalized, or
Right, queued per region is another way to do it. But there's no magic storage pill in small. So if the workloads are heavily read and infrequently written to, then having replicated quorum write clusters are possible. Just as long as you don't expect writes to be super fast.
Of course, it's not going to be like a streaming thing to just take the whole video and stream and all of that. No, it's just going to be simple like MySQL data or something like that, your kilobyte or something.
Keep the cluster small. I mean, if it's MySQL, I would recommend not using the actual storage system to do that. I would use the native protocol. I'd run DockerLA on top of a very simple block volume, right? And then use Galera in order to do the replication. Because then you can do synchronous replication within a single region and then async to the forum.
That's not a good idea to share that.
Some people are brave enough to do it. Personally, I don't feel comfortable doing it. Maybe that's just because of the way my apps behave differently. I might have a different attitude, but I try not to do that. I try not to rely on my awesome storage system to replicate blocks across regions. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't do that either. I don't want to replicate blocks outside of my data center so much.
Right. I mean, you can replicate them async.
Yes.
That's fine. And do that all day, every day, continuously. That's cool.
And maybe not
just don't expect to do a write in one data center and a read in the other data center, and to have your read
be the same
what
thing.
you just wrote. Right. If you do that, you can, but your write behavior is going to be extremely slow.
Due to those the speed of light and stuff.
Speed of light. Yeah. Speed of light problem. Light's very slow, actually. When you start talking about replication across something in here.
So,
Sure.
Do you work with the multi-region cluster, like the one cluster in this region and another cluster in And AWS.
Not in AWS. I do it in Rackspace Cloud.
You guys don't have any ingress issue, federation on the ingress? Like the trading, because basically what we have common two different regions, and we're trying to have a federation between the two clusters. If you create something service, it's going to be split in two different clusters as a like a deployment, and then you do the service. Then when you do the ingress that's less than one cluster, not in another cluster. So you basically have like a load balance and everything just in one cluster. It's not going to do another cluster. It's not going to do the same ingress. So I have to do it manually. So once it's a normal behavior or
Also,
something.
keep in mind, you're not going to have the same IP address space in region A as you have in region B.
No, it's going to take time to get there anyway.
So having the same ingress rules doesn't work because it's based on a single address.
That's all I think. You normally have to do it manually. As a solution. But other part is okay, so because everything
That's because your IPAM is not going to be global. It's regional. Unless you have a network like Mullins where you've got global anycast.
I have a right now what I did
Hey, who wants pizza?
ingress controller.
I got my manager's credit card burning a hole in my soft pocket. Well, no, and I can't buy stuff. They can't expense that. You don't want pizza anymore?
You should ask at 7.
Well, I'm hungry. I don't know about you.
It takes
I'm
time.
hungry now.
It takes time to get there.
Yeah, it's going to take time to fix it.
Extra room for beer.
Hey, Adrian, what's the URL? Where's the URL for the examples or whatever? What are we doing here? We have some latecomers.
Birthday.playwithdocker.com.
Birthday.playwithdocker.com.
Play-with-docker.
Can you put it up on the?
I can put it up bigger. Here we go.
There you go.
Bam. Thank you. Happy day.
Yeah, let me zoom the camera in on it.
Have we put the ingress controller at your traffic? It's gonna go do that for us. About the same thing like a Nginx controller, ingress controller, like managing those stuff. So when you're coming from that, basically it's something like a actually virtual machine kind of like that. But you can't say that this is for example, domain is going to go to this service. So this is a ingress controller. So we put it there. Then select the geographic, like the latency, and like rules for the guys coming from the East Coast, so East Coast have to go to this load balancer, this load balancer go to this. So there's the idea of the ingress, and I was thinking so that way, you have to say how to do that.
All right.
So,
I've never seen that. Never seen that.
So I was just making sure that you research.
Well, I can't say it doesn't exist, but I've never seen it.
That ways to set up is working, but automation in that part, I have to really answer. To just go and create the second inside the second cluster, not the main cluster.
Have you tried using a constraint label? Okay, so you can label the remote region. You can run in your manifest for the secondary. You can use constraints that only can be deployed in the So you do the first one with the constraint to the local region, and the second one with the constraint to the remote region, and then you end up with one in each. Called a label. You label the actual Kubernetes cluster per region. No, it's It's just a piece of metadata that the kube scheduler consults.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm not like professional.
Like it look different.
Not a follow up and miss out on I'm missing the
Oh yeah.
So did Jessica tell you about the managed Kubernetes strings?
So it's almost like
about the development side?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're starting off with managed Kubernetes.
Oh, yeah, and like, I started actually, I was talking about
The idea there is that when we have these kind of questions, there's an architect we're going to design it.
yeah, we first tried on software. But OpenStack part, of course, I have to go first. Learn OpenStack. Then I learned the set up the schooling on OpenStack. Each class is we use Code.
One visit driver.
Yeah, actually, or we're looking for the
The idea is
other clusters get the channel. And I yesterday Cody said it's not a good idea to have a private cloud cluster and like a public cloud cluster inside work on it. Like having one cluster internal inside and one cluster in the public. So
you'll just decide at deploy time which one to send the peer app to. So you might have one class of apps that you do want to host to public cloud and another class of apps you want to host to private cloud.
But we cannot have half of that.
It's possible, but
Like,
people,
for example,
people tend not to do that because the chatter between those things ends up being very expensive from a bandwidth accounting perspective. Right? So if you're paying 22 cents a gigabyte for every single gigabyte that goes between the public and private cloud, you start seeing a bill for that. You're like, whoa, it's costing me $25,000 a month for bandwidth just to have this split across public and private. Does that really make sense? And usually, people don't do it for that reason. There's also a latency between the public cloud side and the private cloud side. Right? And that usually ends up being a problem. So what we end up seeing is, yes, people use multi-cloud, but they don't do cross-cloud.
Someone here, someone
Exactly.
not.
Right.
Someone
You might have an application that has a front end, and the front end needs to scale out.
Hey, is there anybody that's
One
hungry that's like vegetarian that doesn't eat
part of
meat?
it on public cloud. But I wouldn't
Hey,
make that like a
I
fine
know,
line.
yeah, you can never go wrong getting a vegetarian.
I would run all in one cloud.
Eat cheese?
most of the time.
Are you eat cheese? Vegetarian?
Even
Close
vegan,
vegan?
it's
We're getting
different.
to eat,
Right.
you know,
You're
our
doing
options
US
are limited,
US
I'm
West.
sure. Use that. But if we got a cheese pizza, we got a non-meat pizza, you eat it. Look, yeah.
Yes. It's not giving you what?
There you go.
Okay. You need Docker for Windows. That will not run. Does that make sense? So you can't actually run that exercise because you're on a party bell.
What is similar, right?
If you're running Windows on your Mac,
Philippines, South
it's
America.
all like do Docker for Windows.
Yeah, I have like
Okay. Well, then put Docker for Windows. It should have a link to that, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, that's me. Well, vegan. So when the vegan is no cheese.
No, vegan is no animal
Yeah,
matter.
you need Windows 10
Okay.
So
anniversary.
if it has a smile on mother, you'll eat it.
Oh, that's right.
You run
It has a
Docker
taste.
for Windows.
100%
And once you've done that,
Okay, so no beer.
Yep. Well, yeah, I don't know why I like there are. Yeah, well, what do you usually as you're studying? Too hot?
I'm still down half my team.
Oh, okay.
So I have no spare time because I'm having to do a bunch of stuff that I don't have anybody to delegate it to. So, we interviewed somebody last week who was one of the most solid people that I've interviewed ever. So I'm hoping that he's willing to take whatever offer it is that they're going to give him. He can be the team lead for the team that we're trying to build again in the office in Romania, so that I can hand off all the support for stuff that's built in Romania, so that I can have my spare time. All firefighting and ticket escalations that the guys on my team don't know how to do because
unless they have like some mental health.
yeah. This week I said, okay, the kids are out school Monday to take vacation. Come back Tuesday, twice as much. It's really a vacation. If you come back, you still have all the stuff to do that happened while you were gone. You just have less time to do it. Yeah. Not out here though. Yes, but to UK, Romania. Well, I would like to be higher remote, and they work for sure. The problem is that their budget for this stuff is the budget to hire a senior person in Israel or in Cluj, not in Los Angeles. So I'm kind of an anomaly in the company as far as that goes. Yeah.
Hi. Are you Edmund Mullen? Podcast. You guys just say last night. Chapter. I was wondering if you guys can offer free admissions to this upcoming conference for us.
Is this the
No, the application. This is that's before us. So you want to do that today? Or do you want to do that next week? We can do that today. And I just need their names and then we'll sign. Okay. And this is of the admission, which is I'll email that to the group so everyone has that. All right. All right, so it's two free tickets.
Got it. I'll do it at the same time I wrap up the other one.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you.
Very good. Happy to be back.
So,
Generally,
This frame was just framed a few seconds ago. This was far away now. So it's all on it's all on the hands. Or is it all being there's still some very good not necessarily saying that it's all done or is expected that right. So this tool that you see right now is we started this one. So obviously, last year that's all I do. So some engineers some engineers are warranted, and most of the
a file system. It's basically a big request. And first file. Configuration file says, here's the other stuff. So if you need something,
it's not pretty easy. It's complimentary, so it doesn't say what the thing is, but at least love this one.
So your layers are Docker is basically the way they do it. You've got a sequence file system. So we've got a lot of processes and other on top of each other. What you see is a combination of everything. That's kind of how your first layer is usually the first person to build the image, and then somebody else can pull it down and add on and pack it into two layers. And you can just keep on doing that. Exactly. And then somebody else that moves next, somebody else has pipelines, somebody else has
Yeah. Oh, right.
I upgraded
Cheers. Well, it's hard to, well, it's insane.
Restarted one, but apparently no official. So the idea with your container is that when you release a container to your application, the container includes all of the application needs, libraries that you want, plugins, all the other stuff. And then you should be able to run that container on any Linux directory. So you should be able to install Docker and run that container. Docker requires otherwise you have to basically process for starting process, that new process, there's a similar process. You divide it on time. No. Some might think that, for example, it's not solid. It's like that. It's not a solid. But it's basically so you can do like
Yeah, the idea is. Yeah, exactly. They use different packages. Yeah, but take that make that one oh yeah, you can have a much higher level of confidence that the environment your software is operating to exactly even if the underlying operating system guarantees because the only difference are this limited set so those interfaces are still the call interfaces stuff inside it. So I can't tell. Right. So the Linux that it runs on, this is why it requires a Linux that is new enough to support security. Along with the functions that support that, when you install Docker software, it sets up necessary interfaces to the kernel. Just execute. Behind the scenes, what we're doing is making all of these calls together. Just starts off how much memory you need for it. Yeah, I think that first number is the IP address of the host, the port rather on the host. The second number is the port on your Docker container. Yeah. Exactly. Privilege, and it might work if you were running this as an administrator. Yeah, it might. Wow. I have X-Card in some ways trickier to develop because they're not exactly the same, and it's not really. It's not. It looks if you're in iTerm or something like that, it looks like you're interacting with it, but it's actually one VM running a view with the container running inside of that, interacting with your Mac. So it's got multiple layers of interaction with the native place. If you map your SSH port to the port, the image probably right there. this is one of the things that orchestration systems are doing. You know what there's no network system. So it's kind of like if you're doing anything something you can ask variables on start and that can improve things like shapes. Yes. Yeah. So we should actually one of the things that to run their sites and they manage all their operations. Templating and they're creating LOBs, load balancing. So these puppets to back like to do ready to go. At that time, assets, whatever environment variables are necessary, our current environment staging or water production. They don't set up somebody it's actually like
So, I was so sort of good. And my sale, all right. Well, no, first we got wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so sensors. Birthday cake. I don't want to book, you know, and then after that, good. Nine. Oh, I got three of me. We're gonna know. We tried to take three. Yeah,
Put another candle on my birthday kiss.
Yeah, but you are from the investment property. Okay, so when you hear it,
Mazda, that's photo.
Study for the exam, be certified.
oh wow.
And that can go on your resume and
I am Sauron.
Expanding. Have the qualification. Oh, they want you now to have qualification. Companies are asking for cert. Are they asking for cert? Or will they bring you in spoon feed? My point is, so, well, you know, we'll train you, or you'll be an intern. We'll let you work for 3 months can't cut the mustard.
Yes.
Sure, tell you that.
Might as well make it easy for you.
Yeah.
So, you know, some people take some experience, right? Other people need someone that want to run into it, you don't have to get with everything.
I usually trust my network.
Probably 2 or 3. But it's also getting it gets recorded as well, so I can take
Or I
it.
would go.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, no, I've worked with this guy before. I've worked with this gal before, and she's awesome. I'm like, great, that's what it's on. I'll come and just verify. Okay, is this a fit? As long as the fit looks like it makes sense, give her a job. Okay. Yeah, I'd say that it's a lot easier to know
But it's something good to put on your resume today.
too. It doesn't hurt.
Okay, that's where I want to go.
Pretty
Great,
darn
thank
pretty
you.
darn hot.
That's great.
If you want to be staff right crew for the next 15 years.
15 years.
15 years in one company.
No, recruiting will fund it.
Oh, Paul, you're good. Yes, recruiters are they're good.
Whether we want to I know Rutgers has like data centers all over the place. We don't have. Yeah,
Yeah. So actually, probably you do that again before they.
Yeah.
Oh,
I know you'll do it differently.
they can live stream this.
Oh, I know what they're doing. They're making sure they don't want to steal that cake. If you steal that cake, would anybody know?
They have like little like common areas back there. So if you're having a little meeting,
Dude, here. This, they got the live stream up, but check it out. So ease up on the profanity, bro. There's the birthday cake.
Hey.
So people, I was just going to give an update. So people have been working on some exercises and they've just finished up. Yeah, isn't that awesome? Yes, beauty. So in about 9 minutes, we're going to, I guess, review some of the submissions or what have you. Then we'll retreat to the break room. Huh? We'll retreat to the break room and then cut the cake and take a big selfie.
Has it made its way through, or are you still
Yeah.
battling it?
I'm just tired now.
Oh, that's a. Is it live right now?
Yes, it's live right now. I don't know. It's getting recorded. So, is anyone watching right now? Maybe. In the ultimate overtime? Sure. Millions of people. Maybe even people from other planets. You never know. What if we get it? If it's properly logged. Anyway, so I'll set up over here then.
Perfect. Thank you, sir.
All right, we're gonna head on back to the other side now for the celebration.
This is exciting. Hey, it's time to cut the cake, man. Pound your beers. It's cake time. Go. Get people to mosey to the break room. If you could help out, please. That would be awesome. This is live. Yes, the live stream. So watch what you say. Here, let me show you. No, it's kind of cool. Here, check it out from over here. So you got these little buttons here.
Like change where the view is.
There's, yeah. Well, there's the move down, and then there's the zoom in. But I keep hitting the wrong freaking button. This should be in. There we go. Yeah. It's Google Hangout. Google Hangout feeding into YouTube. So, like, if we wanted to have guests, say we wanted Jerome Petterazzi to chime in and wish us down in Playa Vista, happy
just jump in. I could
Docker 4.
done the hangout in comments.
Yeah, it's not the stew. It's not the. You didn't get all the chatter.
I know.
You didn't get the mixed nuts. My idea. Thank you.
That's
We got pizza coming too.
question.
Yeah.
Does that work pretty well? The
Works
Hangouts
for
on
me.
YouTube?
Well, the
Or the
the-
Hangouts on air? Is that what
yeah. No, Hangouts on air works. Actually, Verizon Digital Media Services with their uplink platform I could actually do ad insertion and some really crazy stuff.
Yeah.
But I personally don't, I'm the only one doing this, and I got to kind of keep an eye on the need of it.
Yeah.
So this is simple, and with these cameras, it works well enough. The big problem is the camera in the room we have. The camera doesn't have, I don't think I have control of the contrast, so the slides are hard to read. Unless they're, black background with white, and they're very legible. So that's the one thing I haven't figured out.
The people want to get their sign.
But it works. Let me grab
It's
some
an alien
stills.
presence.
All right. Only a bunch of happy birthday celebration for Tim.
So hey, you're gonna sing happy birthday, right?
La 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 la.
Come on, man, don't be a stranger. Come on. We need to take a photo.
That's the way off the
We haven't had that many beers, so don't need to be propped up. Come on in. Okay. Come on in, everybody. All right. All right, everybody.
Let's gather into a photo if we can with.
Well, we'll do a happy birthday and then let's get into a photo.
All right.
Then we'll cut the cake. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3. Me.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Robert. Happy birthday to you.
This guy, right? Not to a piece of software. I say, pieces of code. It's crazy. All right, so now we want to do a big group picture. Right? You want to get everybody here? Everyone behind the cake. Everyone behind the cake. Come on. Let's go. Okay, no one escapes.
Yeah. Get behind the cake, everybody.
Unless you're going to take
Don't you want to get back there?
Yes,
take one for
here. Use this.
Is it
So here,
auto?
yeah, it's in auto mode. Use that to zoom, and then that to get. It's digital. Just hit this big button.
I have one of
Get
those.
it in.
I think I can work it. Okay, you guys need to. All right, cheers. Happy birthday. One more.
Hey.
I'll give you these chairs.
How many beers did you have, Michelle? I don't know if this is good.
Not enough, Gordon.
Yay! You can zoom, make sure you can have zoomed all the way back. Yay! Or just take, Michelle, maybe just take a few steps back.
Yeah, okay. Yes, boss.
It's high res. We'll fix it up in post.
Oh, you will? You're going to Photoshop it?
Oh, yeah. Yay. Okay,
I think
let's have some cake.
That's You want to just kind of look
Yeah, sure.
those?
I'm not gonna try and get these people back in the same place again. Yeah, that's good.
How's,
Well, it's good.
yeah? Well, profit, and then I was trying to get market things.
Yeah. Once again, I can crop that
Yeah.
out. It would just be like a little strip.
Good job. Now,
playing Cut the Cake by Average White Band. Come on. He does.
Not that song.
I think it's like that. All right. Dude, it's chocolate cake.
I'm sure Google like DockerLA.
There you go. Yeah. No, I'm just remember. What about yourself?
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So I guess
that's like the OC. They really have some good technical stuff. Yeah, I know what down in OC, like, oh, I'm standing. You know, like, in OC, like, one of the guys I know he's heavily involved in security. Tell me, like, do you find like differences in the San Gabriel Valley and San Fernando Valley presentations as far as orientation goes? Are they mainly like sysadmin or DevOps oriented? Or?
Okay, well, I would say personally that San Fernando Valley tends to be more of a social.
Do they have presentations there? Like, or simply more get-togethers?
I find myself mentoring people. How do I do my business called things? How do I do it? What's the best part? So,
Well, that's, that can be good.
and there's and then they have people who are into 3D printing, bring out it's just fun.
What do the presentations tend to be like out there? Are they DevOps or what?
I can't say they have a broad category. Getting the speakers.
I feel mainly in LA, I think like the orientation tends to be DevOps. That's why I asked about that. We do have some
you know, but it's kind of really good. Maybe 1 in 6 or something. Right, you'll get like containerization, you know, like what do you call it? You know, systems for installing mass numbers of systems. Yeah, exactly. You know, so we heard them all. Chef, blah 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 blah. It's like that kind of.
Yeah, chef, public, principal. I mean,
And actually, you know, my orientation is not so much DevOps or sysadmin anymore. Because I'm more interested in that. So it's like, and there's another group where we have a UUASC-LA group, and it tends to be very, it's actually been sadly what we attended, but they tend to be a little more app-oriented. Although they get their share of the stars and actually sometimes we combine the meetings.
where's that?
Now that I said that, I'm trying to think what some of the meetings have been like. They might have, like someone will come, well, this is more DevOps, so I don't think about it, but like someone will come out and talk about the company's website and the challenges they face.
Okay.
Doing that. But that's actually more. But then, you know, like we had all the
more case studies.
yeah, case study, and but also I think like they've had things like where guys gave presentations on. I have to think, was that UUASC or UUASC? Where people did like one of the coolest ones was what do you call it? Like circular photography.
Oh yeah.
You have to sell and that was fun because we know about the guys that
Some guy did something at the This is an app. It was awesome. We took it together. Let's see. It was the coolest thing I've ever seen. He showed how to build an antenna out of PVC, which I never knew was possible. There is a feed. FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, shows the location of all the airplanes. He fit this 2 feet thing into a Raspberry Pi, and I think he had a Raspberry Pi hooked up to a CRT, displaying blips, all these things. Oh, and there was a vast array of radio technology, which you downloaded. The antenna was doing the frequency, application that you downloaded, which knows the frequency and then spits out stuff and it's CRT.
See, I would have really enjoyed education. And we have had stuff like, I'm trying to think, like, I've been to presentations on training. Trying to remember if it's UUASC or LA. So there's some overlap.
LA is looking, they meet on a Saturday, don't they?
They used to meet on an alternate Thursday to UUASC, but I think like they're really having problems with them getting enough people to come and like the organizers. No, they tend to be more. They do have their share of DevOps, but I would say they're more app-oriented. So UUASC. Well, that's my opinion, but you can ask Jordan, he'll probably tell me.
But you know, like, trying to think like, I guess, like, you know, and when I think about it, maybe what my personal orientation is, I don't really care what the platform is. I just want to see cool. Like, have you ever been to one of the pro They tend to be heavily Windows centric. I mean, stuff, people will bring in stuff for code. And I've seen some of the coolest presentations there. Like, in fact, some of them were Windows centric. Like, there was a guy from one of the vendors who used to present mostly at the code camps, and what he would talk about is using basically linear algebra to like solve these really classic problems. But his examples would be whether you're using IBM's net, whatever, I forget what it was called, something network, blah, 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 software, all of the APIs. But you could follow along and get plenty out of it, like, you know, you didn't have to touch that particular software. And it was really interesting. And then there's this guy and his son. The guy's name is Mullins. And I swear, every damn code camp, he would show up, and both he and his son would have a presentation. His son was okay. He's in
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So, like, he would always do the presentation. Father did the presentation. One of the presentations he gave was on, oh, look, I hacked together this product for the Android phone. What it was you put together an application, so you get a little, you know, like a person on your screen, like a talking person, and he didn't worry about syncing the words. Right. But basically, what you did is you talk to it, and it talks back. And the way he did this was he used Google speech recognition, you know, goes up to the files, like over, you know, and then he used AI, public AI software to figure out what was going on. And then he would
Say something and tell us about it. How are you doing today?
He would have a conversation with you.
Yeah, oh my God.
And think about that. Like,
yeah, okay, simple idea, but this is, I mean,
the guy was a freaking, you know, that's what I mean, he's a freaking genius. Because, like, well, yeah, you know, like, you can think of that, but what person would think about, I'm going to throw this all together and then go do it and then show it, at, you know, and explain how he did it. Wow. It was like, so, like, that. Hey,
rock, yeah.
Because, I think I'm going to take off because I want to go home and do the doctor.
Yeah.
I couldn't do them. I just had my phone, and I made a sad discovery. My phone screwed up with their website. It just was not having enough real estate. It's really weird. I just got this phone about a month and a half ago. And, it's a Moto G.
Let's retreat to the main room.
All right,
Shall we?
Yeah.
You can bring the cake with you.
Did you actually order pizza?
Yes.
Oh, dang. So there's an incentive.
Hey.
Jordan, how do we validate?
Did you get a little? You should get a little coupon or something.
I did not.
All right. Give me a minute. And I'll.
Don't worry.
Because then we had street party. Hey, we're gonna have a panel, an advanced panel. Adrian's got 10 issues he brought up, and people can bring others. So please retreat to the front.
IP protocol
main area.
transmitted from one node to another.
All right, let's do this.
Depends on what the project is. So like,
Actually, let
Oh,
me,
you need
can I
that?
grab, well,
Okay.
I might want to need one close to the power. Push this back a little bit. It's a live stream. It's a camera.
All right. For sharing. So I took 11 notes that I would like to share. And I'll start with the first one. Number one, in my list of Docker pro tips and tricks, don't run old Docker versions. Seems obvious, you're going to chuckle, but old versions are not patched. So you don't get the security updates and you don't get the bug fixes. If you happen to be a CentOS 6 or RHEL 6 or prior lover, then you haven't been getting updates for a long, long time. And there are bugs where if you start a container, it leaves the namespace open. And if you start creating lots and lots of containers, destroying them, eventually you reach a file handle limit where you'll get a too many open files error when you try to run a container, and it won't work. And the fix is run a new kernel and run a new version of Docker. So if you're a old distro lover, stop loving the old distro and get on the new.
Keeping your infrastructure up to date is what is an exercise to do.
Good. So upgrade to the newest OS. Keep no older than 60 days on Docker Community Edition. So release, I think 18 or is it 17 is what they're calling the current one.
So when you say core OS, are you talking about the host or the container image based on like an image Ubuntu or something else?
I'm talking about the host, the one that actually runs the Docker data. Keep that updated. That far into that. Okay, anyone volunteer to be next? Should I keep going? We'll yield as soon as there's somebody ready. All right, we need more time for courage. I'll give you number 2. Do not write to the container file system. Use -- read only and bind mount var log if possible. Why?
You don't want your logs to disappear with the container.
Because if you log into var log and you accumulate a bunch of crap in the writable layer of your layered file system, var log on your host grows to be giant and eventually reaches whatever the configured storage limit is, and then nothing works after that. So
setting aside whether you can be able to write to the host.
right, and so if you believe in immutable infrastructure, which I'm a huge fan, if you like that pattern, your containers never change. You only destroy them and replace them with new ones. You never actually change them at all. You build a new Docker image, you deploy the new Docker image, you destroy the old versions. So that's the discipline. So the lesson learned, when people say, yeah, I'm getting really bad performance writing to my container file system, the answer is don't do that. Bind out and bypass. Right. Okay, pro tip number 3. clean up your orphaned images using RMI, Docker images correct none, awk print 3. So use Docker to list all images that are associated with none in angle brackets and input that into RMI to flush all them out. Now, if you just run community images, you're never going to have an accumulation of crap. But if you're the type like me who's constantly building custom images, you end up with all kinds of old versions of stuff that get orphaned that accumulate on the host and end up eventually consuming all of your storage, especially if you're using it for your CI pipeline, because you're constantly running builds, right? You're running builds 7 times a day, all day long, every single day. So you're going to end up with thousands and thousands and thousands of crap images. Just write a cron job that goes through and looks for orphaned images and just deletes them out. If they're not associated with any active container, there's no reason to keep them around because you're just going to build another one 10 minutes from now. All right.
And there's a third-party component called Janitor that does that Docker cleanup for you.
Called Janitor.
It's called Janitor.
I just learned something new. Awesome. Thank you. I have a cron job for that, but I would love to use a tool for that. I'd love to just standardize something. Does it run as a container?
It runs as a container, and I run my own V2 repository, version 2 repository, and I build like 100 containers a day, and only the last one that's being used will be kept. All 99 will be cleaned up automatically.
That's awesome. I love it. I love it. Okay. Anyone else want to volunteer? I'll keep going. All right. Pro tip number 4. Pattern. Build your image once and use a private Docker registry on every host using a common backend on either Cloud Files or EC2 or S3. Let me explain what I mean by that. So the pattern is you build your image one time on a single host and you publish it into a private registry. And now you can run that from any host that has access to that private registry. So you're not building the same image all over the place in your infrastructure and expecting that to be a deterministic process. You're proving that it's a deterministic process by creating the image only one time and then using a mechanism to distribute that. Now, Docker Inc. wants you to use Docker Hub or Docker Store or whatever the heck they want to call it now. But they want you to pay for storage of lots of these private registries. You don't have to do that. You can run Docker Registry version 2. There's a container called registry. And there's a label called 2. So if you run registry:2, you get your own. And it can be backed on a local file system or it can be backed on a cloud storage system. So let's say, for sake of discussion, that you're using S3 on the back end. The actual images are stored on the S3 storage system. And then you can run your registry container bound to localhost on each of your Docker hosts that are all sharing that same S3 bucket. Is this making sense? Mm-hmm. So you've got this scale-out storage that Amazon's storage system already has, right? You're going to get the scale-out read performance against it. You're going to get a deterministic name by which to access the containers, right? It's going to be localhost : whatever port you ran the registry on, say 5,000 for sake of discussion, right? So localhost : 5,000/name. And that's going to work globally across your entire infrastructure as long as every compute host is running one version of registry. So you've got one little utility container called registry that runs on every single host. So what do you do to make sure that that's always available? Anyone know? How do you make sure that it starts when Docker starts? So it's always there when you go to run your containers. Okay, when you define the container, when you start it, when you do the original Docker run command, use a thing called restart policy. So Docker run -- restart policy equals always registry:2 blah, 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 blah. All my credentials for accessing EC2 will come after that in environment variables, right? -e blah, -e blah, -e blah. So I do that once per host. Then every single time I upgrade Docker, every single time a host reboots, it's going to start that container up automatically. And then all of my other container launches are going to work after that point in time. So now I've got my own distributed private data store for storing all of my containers. I'm putting it on a backend that is not constrained by any file system size or volume limit. And I'm guaranteed to only have one version of the artifact.
Yay!
I want to do a talk just on that. But yeah, I just want to share that pattern. Anyone want to follow up on that?
Are you able to make those individual ones, like lock them down so that they can't, right?
Yeah.
Like, is that a pattern? I mean, obviously they wouldn't be because I'm not running Docker stuff on each of those hosts, but.
That's a good question. How do you get a read-only view?
Yeah. I can do that from AWS, but.
You can mount
The registry
AWS.
has a read-write, or read-only password as well as read-write attribute.
You can mount as a
When
read-only.
you start the registry
That's true.
container, you can start in a read-only mode. That's true.
Okay.
That's true. Yeah.
So it's not going to be graceful. It'll give you a failure error, but it'll achieve what you want.
Any more patterns? Okay. Pro tip number 5. Okay, create your own base images. So if you're building your own custom containers, the prevailing practice is the first line of the Docker file is from, and has some name of a base image, right? It's from Ubuntu, or it's from Alpine, or it's from something, right? Mine are from Adrianato / something. And I do that for a reason. The upstreams of all these different base distros update their package repositories for bug fixes and security updates more frequently than they tag those soft names in your in the Docker registry. So you can actually have a newer version. Like if I say, okay, from CentOS 7, and then I run, the first thing in my Docker file is yum update something, I'm going to get an update because what was tagged in the Docker registry is older than what's available in the yum repo. If I have my own, and nightly I just watch and do whatever the update command is, right? The apt upgrade or whatever the command is for that distro. And I'm building my own container, and then I get a notification every time it's changed, or better yet, trigger Jenkins a CI job to go and rebuild all of my container images and inject them into my registry. And for services that can support it, automatically restart all of my services. So every time there's a security update, if you want it to be automatically rolled out, it can be, and faster than just rebuilding a Docker image against base.
One more question. So in that case, you are going to pull, for example, Ubuntu and update a repository list and then commit to your one, or you're going to, from scratch, make an image from Ubuntu or do something?
So if my images are based on an upstream distro, my Docker file, the one that I build nightly, will be from that distro. And it will do whatever the update command is. And then I will get an event. What I'll do is I'll actually do, and if you want to know how to do this, it's in GitHub. If you look at GitHub Adrianato, there's an example one in there for CentOS 6 that does exactly this. So it downloads the container off of the base image. It runs the updater against it. Then it compares the package lists. And if it's new, it creates a diff, and then it commits that diff back to GitHub, which then has a commit hook that executes a webhook that actually starts triggering CIs that rebuild all of my containers, right? So it's all integrated based on the fact that the thing is updated. You can do the same thing with something like Anchor looking for security vulnerabilities, right? So if you do a scan and you find that you're running a vulnerable version of something that has a CVE against it, you can trigger a whole roll back or roll forward, or you can have some predefined action by which you do this.
And what if I don't want to pull, for example, Ubuntu image? I have an Ubuntu installation disk, and I want to make an image.
What happens if you want to make your own?
Yeah, from scratch.
You can do that too.
Okay.
I mean, another advantage of using your own is if you intentionally don't want to upgrade, right? You still want to be based on an upstream, but you want to have control of when it gets upgraded. Because say you've got a policy that says you're only allowed to upgrade during a maintenance window. You can't just, you're not like Adrianato flying by the seat of your pants upgrading stuff automatically. You want to actually plan and be doing it only during the maintenance windows.
Maybe you test these things first.
Maybe you do. Maybe you scan them. Maybe you have smoke testing against them. Maybe somebody actually tries it and sees if it works first. Yeah. Okay. So that's pro tip number 5. Anyone else thought of a good one yet?
I found out earlier that the copy semantics in Docker files are not exactly the same as CP. Specifically, you have to include a trailing slash of the directories. Otherwise, it will treat your directory target as a file.
That's right.
So one of the example apps.
That's a good one. Sure, that's a pro tip. Explain how it works.
So when you're writing a Docker file and using copy, for instance, in the cat gifs one earlier, when you copy requirements.txt to user source app, you have to include that trailing slash, otherwise it will copy it to a file named user source app. So, and that actually makes sense when I think about it a little bit more, because the Docker file doesn't, I don't know if it's creating that file system on the fly as necessary for the parent directories, or if it would fail if the parent directories didn't exist.
It creates them.
Okay.
It recursively creates the depth that you specified.
Oh yeah, useful to know what's going on underneath there, because that would explain my problem before I ran into it. But yeah, my habit of leaving off trailing slashes that caused my thinking about it.
Right.
Well, the creation kind of makes sense too, because with the trailing slash, you're saying it's a directory. You just leave it. It did what you told it.
Exactly.
It was great. Yeah.
Yeah, but it didn't have a way to know it was a directory.
Yeah.
All right, pro tip number 6. Oh, I already mentioned this one. This is restart policy. So -- restart policy. I think there are 3 built-in policies. There's one called always. There's one called unless -stopped, which means it won't restart it if you manually stop it first. So if you go in and you're like Docker stop container name, and then you go and you restart Docker, it'll leave it stopped instead of restart always, which if you do a Docker stop against it and then you come back and restart Docker, it's going to start back up again. And then there's a policy, I think, called never. I don't know why you would use it. Maybe if you had one that was set to always before and you wanted it to stop doing that, you could set it to never without destroying the container. So yeah, I definitely recommend it. If you're not already using restart policy, to look at that. It's a really useful one. Pro tip number 7. If you are putting package update commands in your Docker files, put them on the last line, not the first line. Why? Why?
So that everything else, the other layers remains the same, and only your single line of all the packages get updated.
Because it caches the output of the command. So if you think about it, if the command, in my case, right, in a Red Hat world, right, if I do my yum update, it saves the output, the actual disk level change of the yum update command and caches it.
Mm-hmm.
So the next time I come back and do a Docker build against that, I get the output of the original yum update, not what's actually in the yum repo. Right? Unless I put it at the end of my Docker file, which means if I'm rebuilding my Docker file, I'm probably adding a new source file or something about it is changing, which is going to invalidate the cache. And if I'm doing my package update command at the end, my package update is always going to pick up the most recent change from whatever the upstream source is. So that's a trick. See what I'm saying? So you're gonna, it's like a never cache this one line in the Docker file. Yeah, that'll be a great feature, wouldn't it? But that doesn't work because of the way that the log structure works. So the way that you achieve that is always by putting it last.
And also using ampersand and for all of the commands on the same line.
Yeah.
That saves the next time you.
So that's a pro tip. Explain this one. That's a good one.
So when you're adding app get commands, you have 2 options. Let's say you have 10 packages. You could add individual lines, 10 lines into your Docker file, or you could add all of those commands in a single line, simply separated by an ampersand sign and then double N sign. And the difference, the impact, what it does is that next time when you're building the file, it's going to prevent your file size from growing into adding multiple layers for each of those separate lines. And you only add a single layer for that entire line of command. So next time a file change happens, or next time the Docker file changes, only one layer has to be touched, not 15 layers.
And that's good for things that you don't expect to change very often as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So find the right balance between whether it needs its own layer or not, depending on how often you expect it to change. That's a good one. Okay, pro tip number 8. Don't build host-specific configuration into your Docker images. I hear a lot of you thinking, duh.
But you run CentOS or Core OS, so you don't get it that mandated. if you're
So let's say you've got an application, okay, and you need it to be configured to be a master, or you need it to be configured as some kind of a subsidiary role. And a configuration directive controls that. So you might say, okay, if it's running on host named 1, then Docker run blah, 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 blah.
no, I was thinking you said host OS.
No, I'm saying don't embed configuration that controls the behavior of the software into the Docker image itself. Leave that generic and inject it either through a -e or pick it up from some service discovery mechanism, like write it into an etcd key and fetch it.
That way.
Or bind mount it through to the file system and manage it using a prevailing configuration management technique. Okay, but if you build it into the image, then what you end up with is a unique image per role of the same service, which is not what you want. If you go back to my original advice of you should only build that container once, test it once, and then deploy it everywhere. Don't build it throughout your infrastructure. Build it one time and have a mechanism by which to distribute that same binary artifact everywhere. And inject the configuration at runtime. You wouldn't believe what I see in production. Crazy, crazy stuff that's built into the image that should not be there.
You want one image that runs in all your environments, not copies of what you think is the same image running in all your environments.
Yep. All right. Pro tip number 9. Okay, this is a fun one. And this will take some explaining for this to make sense. If you need HA pairs of load balancers, how many of you need your load balancers to be highly available? And you want to run them containerized? Yeah? And you want to run them as software? Yeah? Okay. You're like me, you're crazy. Then you can use keep alive D to make a pair of IP addresses highly available. Right? So you've got host 1 and host 2. On host 1, you've got IP address 1 as master, IP address 2 is standby. You have the reverse on host 2. All right, so you've got 2 highly available addresses on a pair of hosts that are protecting each other. All right? Now, when you start your containers, you share the namespace with the host by using --net equal host, which means you have access to all of the host's interfaces, which means you have access to these highly available addresses. Okay, and you run your HA proxy containers in those containers. Right? You use a Linux feature called non-local bind, which means that HA proxy can listen for an address that is not even on the host. Yes, HA proxy can listen. So it's called, this is the name of the thing, net.ipv4.ip_non-local_bind equals 1. You set that in your sysctl, or you do sysctl -w, this thing, and then your kernel will allow your socket commands to listen for addresses that do not exist. But once you're listening for that socket address that doesn't exist, and it later run out of battery, then it later starts to exist, that listen starts to work. So you can fail. So you can fail back and forth.
Packets there in the first place is outside of the purview of non-local bind.
Exactly. So you have every single HA proxy configured exactly the same way, listening to all of these highly available addresses that are in the HA pairs. And you've got keep alive D swinging the addresses around as your hosts are available and not. And so traffic is always flowing from your critical clients to your critical load. Uninterrupted. Works great. I've proven it works.
What happens if 2 nodes both have the same address at the same time?
Well, that's what keep alive D is for with the VRRP protocol. right? There's a election that occurs to determine who's active.
If you really want to do something like that, you can use something like, if you really want to make sure of that, you use something like Stoneth to actually kill off whatever's malfunctioning.
Yep, and that's a plugin to keep ID.
Yeah, but what I was meaning to mention was that's not really Docker specific. You know?
No.
This is absolutely.
Yeah, what I'm saying is
if you want to do software load balancing, you need that.
Use the prevailing Linux tools. And if you don't like keep ID, that's fine. Use whatever you use. Use Marathon, whatever, I don't care. But it's the same technique, but use Docker containers bind mounted to the host with non-local bind. That's the pattern. That's the aha moment where you're like, yes, everything can be containerized. Awesome. And by the way, the performance is the same as if it were running outside the container from a network perspective, because I'm not copying packets through the Docker proxy to get them into the container. I'm listening right on the host socket. So the flow of that traffic is high performance. Okay, pro tip number 10. github.com/AdrianAuto/CentOS6. If you want an example of the how do you build your own upstream base image and make it evented. You can use that off of public Docker Hub if you want. if you're a CentOS 6 lover. But the same exact technique can apply to any build, any OS, any distro. But that's the pattern that I wanted to publish. All right, and then pro tip number 11, use Docker Compose to deploy related containers that need to come up in a defined order. Problem I have all the time is when I manually start stuff up and I'm using restart policy, it all works. And then something comes along and upgrades Docker, all the containers get bounced, and then they come up out of order. I'm like, nothing works because this thing that all these things depend on didn't exist at the time they started. And I have this either period of time where things don't work and then mysteriously they suddenly start working seconds later, or I have a situation where it's broken and it never gets fixed. But if I use Compose up to make it come up, then when it comes back up, again, it comes back up in the same order. That's how we get the ordered behavior. So those are my 11 pro tips.
Are they on your GitHub?
No, they were reserved just for this group. The only one that's on GitHub is the pattern for the rebuild.
I have one.
Okay, I would give you this, but it's out of battery.
And I'm not sitting inside the inside circle. Is that okay?
It's fine.
Okay.
We don't.
So the IP tables. Now, if anybody's like me, the IP tables on your system is a sacred space. When you're running your containers, let's say on Ubuntu, let's take an example, and if you're using UFW firewall, let's say you only open port 22 and you've not opened anything else, you would expect that anything that you run on your host is not going to be exposed to external host automatically, external users automatically. So let's say you run a service on port 5000, but because you haven't allowed it in your firewall, that service is not going to be visible from outside. However, when you run Docker run -p with a port binding, and if you actually test that service, suddenly your outside users will start seeing that service even if you have not explicitly opened it in your firewall. The reason is when you run a Docker daemon, unless until you specify no IP tables, Docker is going to go and put an entry without explicitly asking for your permission. It's going to actually open up that code. So if you're security conscious, you may want to be aware of who's touching your firewall when you run a command.
It does it in a child chain at least.
Yes, that's a good part. Yeah.
So you can hook, and it is possible to hook your own stuff. And there's a subsidiary chain that gets executed before that, where you can put your own stuff. So you can put a default deny line in there. If you don't trust Docker to always be started with the IP tables off, you can have a system level config where that subsidiary chain has a default deny rule. So no matter what Docker does down below that, it will all be ignored. Yeah.
So the way I've solved that is by adding the parameter no IP tables in the Docker daemon start option as part of the syscontrol file.
Good.
And that kind of achieves the same end goal. It allows your firewall to take the precedence over Docker.
Yep. But then you need a way to do your own orchestration for controlling the firewall rules.
Right. Yeah. So that's
You can do all your ruling stuff on route per route table, and it's like above of everything. Docker's creating the rules on that table, and that's because it's a binding port, it's doing forwarding. So first of all, it's coming from pre-route, and it's not going to filter table. It's going to different tables, and it's not blocking. So you can do route tables, put everything to route tables, and never think about it.
Yep. Cool. So what do you have that hurts? Do we have any pain? Tell me your pain.
Actually, this was a pain from a couple of days ago, and possibly actually also as a pro tip. If you're attempting to mount a host directory into your container, ensure that host point is not the mount point for a volume. So if you have an NTFS volume mounted at mount share me, do not ensure that what you're mounting into your container is at least one subdirectory down. Otherwise, you will get strange things and nothing will be written to your NTFS volume if it's changed inside the container.
Right, because it's getting the one off the parent file system. It's getting the inode off the parent file system. It's binding that, not the share.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So, yeah, that's somewhat confusing if you don't expect it.
Create a subdirectory and bind out that.
Exactly that way.
one other thing that was a pain point until I discovered the solution, of course, is by default, if you don't, in your Docker Compose, if you don't use log options and restrict the file count and the file size, any software that you're running inside Docker container, if it's putting the output on your standard output, it's going to fill up Verilog so fast, and it's going to actually take over the host file system, like you mentioned earlier, and it's going to jam everything. Unless you use the max file size option, which Docker is pretty nifty about enforcing, your container, Docker container is going to stay at that disciplined size limit, no matter how many years it keeps on running continuously.
Which size limit option are you referring to?
So there is something called log options in the Docker Compose file, a directive called log options, and then there is the sub parameter called max file count. You can put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 50, whatever you want, and then max file size. So what it'll do is like it'll only allow 5 files, the log files, or standard output log files, to be built there. All 5 of them only at 50 megabytes only. So does it come with delete them all the time? Yeah, it'll essentially play a role of log locate.
And it does that within the context of the container file system?
Yeah, it does that within the context of container file system. But Java dumps so many standard errors, just like as a hobby. So basically, your log file, if you don't regulate it, then the Verilog file on the container are going to get filled up in a very short time.
Yeah.
Or you can use a rsyslog to put everything from container to remote server, then manage everything there. Basically, do not write anything inside of like Docker on the host. You can send everything via rsyslog to remote server, and then there manage everything.
Right. Yep. And you can use you can actually get the standard out through the log driver, which is again pluggable.
Log driver.
So if you have an app that just writes the standard out, right, that you can view with Docker logs,
right.
Docker logs container.
Docker logs, Docker Compose logs, and then Docker logs in that container.
Yeah. So you can actually configure Docker to stream those into
Kibana or with server and port, everything will go the standard output to the.
Yep. Put them into your Elk stack. Usually it's debugging the app when you want to see that, when you're trying to debug your app.
Yeah.
Or if, things didn't start the way you expected and you want to look in, like normally what I write to standard out is not the actual log stream. I'll write the log stream to a specific file handle, but I'll write like the status of the startup command, right? So if it errors on start, that's where you're going to be able to go and look to see what was the error on start. Yep.
What do people use Docker containers for? Like the business reasons why?
Why would I use that versus VMs? Okay, so let's say I want to run more work on less hardware. It's a way to do that. If I want to be able to build my continuous integration artifacts faster. So if I want, let's say I'm a software development shop and I'm building new features, and in order for those features to be tested, they've got to go through an automated testing system. If you've got a system that's building virtual machine images that are big, right, the creation and then execution of those, the moving them over the network takes time. So if I can cut that time way, way down and allow my developers to iterate more quickly, they become more productive. And I would argue that the single most valuable asset that a company has in the software-defined economy is developer productivity. So if you have a tool that helps developer productivity, that's worth money. So those are kind of the two key drivers. You hear a lot of things like like I've been talking about immutable infrastructure, right? Testing a single artifact. So having a way to test your software in a way so that you're confident when it reaches the production environment, it's going to behave the same way that it tested. If you don't have a system like that, if you don't have a tool like Docker to help you with that, then making your test environment match your production environment can be a very complicated task. And usually test environments don't match what you run in production. So containers are a nice way of like bundling up everything that your app is going to use once it's launched and making that the actual thing that gets used in prod.
It helps ensure that when you do a release, you're not releasing just your application. You're releasing the context and the environment that your application runs in, so that you can guarantee not just my customer, my user is getting what I wrote, but they're getting it in the context and environment that I ran it in. So I have a higher level of confidence that they're going to get the same results I got.
Right.
To add to that, for large companies, your standardization is a big motivation. Let's say you have a developer sitting somewhere in some other part of the country, and the developer team sitting in the other side of the world, in China or somewhere else. And one team is developing components that everybody else is dependent on. How are you going to ensure that you keep retaining that productivity while one team keeps on releasing their software? How do you know that they're going to work somewhere else when they go to production and stuff like that? So I think that guarantee of standardization that comes into it as part of Dockerization or containerization at least, it's a big tool for companies large companies.
So you have to have a repository to
repository, as well as you no longer have to worry about defining separate rules for different sites or different teams.
Right.
Everything that's needed for one developer to pass his or her work onto the next team is defined nicely in one file.
Okay, so yeah, that's between
exactly. So your configuration, your execution, your runtime environment, and your output, the vehicle of how it gets there, all is standardized.
One more question, like continuing with that. Did you ever use other containers like LXC or the other containers? And what kind of experience did you have with them?
Okay, so I'm going to repeat that slightly louder. What other container
did you use
did I use before Docker? So LXC, and I used nspawn to start namespaces and C groups.
You used BSD jails back in the day.
I used Slayer zones. That was in what, 95?
Yeah.
96?
Oh wow.
This is not a new concept.
So
Okay, so what was
And
experience
oh, by the
like?
way, Solaris zones were presented at the Unix virtualization roundtable at UUASC.
Mhm.
We had we had hardware and software virtualization panel, including a demo from John Klingen, who was running hundreds of zones on his laptop.
And a lot of these concepts can be traced back pretty cleanly to mainframe operating systems. So it's
Although
evolution.
the container namespace stuff, that's a little tweak to get much better efficiency than some of the older schemes. And then unikernels and all that crazy stuff.
So the key difference, as I mentioned earlier, the key difference between what Docker brought and what existed before is this idea of the container image and the layered file system that the container gets when it runs. Those two concepts combined together are what make it really compelling to use.
the container as a deployment artifact is a huge win. That's the primary driver of my job for people building containerization is being able to control the environment and reduce headaches for operations from listening to people say it works on my desktop.
Mhm. Yeah.
I have a question. Do the power users end up using containers also to achieve what typically KVM virtualization gives you automatically, like things like CPU quota enforcement or a jailed execution environment? Do people use containers for those kind of use cases?
They do, they're going to have time. The security model there is
Well, hold on. He's saying
some
from a
steps
he's saying
down.
from a performance perspective. They're fundamentally different features because the quotas that are in C groups are for sharing access based on a proportion of a resource, whereas what you get through KVM is a partitioned allocation of the resource.
You get a guaranteed slice.
Right.
Versus you're saying dynamically available slicing.
It's limits
Time sharing.
and sharing. So it's weighted, it's a weighted, it's a WFQ formula to determine how much of the resource you get access to versus pre-provisioned.
Right. So if you had 100% of your CPU slice for you and you spun up 2 containers, at no point you can guarantee that container 1 will never cross 50, the 50% of its portion.
Well, you could.
I mean, the Docker has this feature like they use the CPU quota, the CPU ticks. So if you give that number, will it actually get enforced in runtime execution?
Only if there are 2 contending for the resource.
Only if they're 2 contending for the resource.
Right. If there are not, it will allow you to burst to whatever the capability is of the hardware.
Ah, I see. Okay.
But it's not going to give you the uniformed, slower performance that the virtualization option would give you.
I see.
Right? Because in KVM, I can say, oh, you're only 1 virtual core.
Right.
So you could never scale beyond, and I can say, I can pin to a particular core on the host. So I can say, not only are you only 1 virtual core, but you never can go off CPU 0. Right? That capability, that granularity is absent from your -C argument on your Docker run.
Right. I think
C group is a way to influence the way that the Linux scheduler allocates resources to a running process group. It's not a hardware level QoS system.
Right. It's not a hardware construct.
Right. So I guess a short answer to your question is most people that I've seen are not using Docker as a mechanism to control relative performance of different containers. They might use like -M to make sure that things don't go crazy and gobble up sick amounts of memory. They might use -C to keep something that they know shouldn't be using a lot of resources at a lower scheduler priority than things that are important. But I don't see like sophisticated balancing beyond those kind of basic uses. If it's happening, I just don't know about it.
Do you think that could add value if Docker ever were to replace all virtualization in the world, and there are only two entities? One is bare metal, and then there's container layer. That's it. Do you think that this kind of features would add value? You don't think that'll ever happen?
Because people want to do cross OS virtualization.
Well, why would you need to maintain 5 versions of kernel if your application never cares about your kernel version?
If your application does. Some people have applications that do.
Right. So legacy database kind of apps, maybe potentially that will be
Custom network stacks. You do hardware launching.
right. Yeah, those kind of things potentially. Well, now they have libvirt on Docker container, by the way.
Think about what the landscape would look like in Amazon, for instance, if they offered only Elastic Container Service. There's 90% of what people do on Amazon would be difficult or non-existent if they didn't have that virtualization layer that lets you slice things up, and critically, that lets them control with a much higher level of assurance resource allocation than we can currently get from the facilities in the kernel.
Right. So that's because right now KVM offers that guaranteed allocation, and Docker Hypervisor, if you may, doesn't offer that. But if it did start offering that, why would, as an Amazon customer, why would you care? As long as your applications come online, they're accessible, why would you have to care how it achieves that capability, as long as it gives you runtime execution environment?
Well, some people are still in an environment where they care about the specific distribution that they're running, and there's considerations for that. Some people don't want to run Linux. I mean, I still run OpenBSD for a lot of my stuff, and so a lot of this conversation is academic as far as that goes. So, I mean, I think if it was a world where everybody is comfortable with a purely Linux runtime from a very limited set of providers, then yeah, containers as the entirety of what's available would make more sense. But I think that there's still too much heterogeneity out there for that to be anything people would offer anytime soon.
I don't think virtualization is ever going away. Ever.
Just like there's still mainframe.
There's just too much. There's too
Well,
much.
that's where virtualization came from.
I mean, there's too much value built into the hypervisor tool chains to just see that re-implemented wholesale by something that is fundamentally different from a technology perspective. You might as well just use them in combination and not see one as a replacement for the other.
Right. I mean, you could end up in a situation, the container sandwich, where libvirt becomes another thing that runs inside a container, but still gives you all those libvirt benefits.
Right. Did you know you can run VMs inside containers?
Well, it's only since last 8 to 12 months.
That's right. So you can run host, container, VM, container, 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 container.
And then VM.
And all that works.
Well, no, I've never been able to do nested containers.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
No, so I've tried the image that gives you that capability, the OS image that Rancher gives, the Rancher OS image.
Yeah.
But beyond that, if I just take generic Linux image and run as a container and try to install Docker, for instance, that has never worked.
Yeah, you need to use privileged containers in order to nest them.
But yeah, so okay, so you're saying that running as a privileged container,
So what we do is we run base OS, and we run a LXC container, and we run Docker inside of that, and we create subcontainers within the LXC container. And that gives us an additional barrier to prevent that exit attack, where we can use LSMs in the context of the LXC container to control what is allowed through the syscall interface and back out to the host.
I see. So that's not really Docker inside Docker. That's Docker inside LXC.
I said nested containers. I didn't say nested Docker.
Fair enough.
You can nest Docker if you want, but you just have to use privileged containers on the outside perimeter. Right.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Privileged container is a strict. I mean, it's a double thing. So, is this still the case? Like,
yeah, it's because it has when you drop Linux caps.
Yeah.
You need caps to do things like mount a file system, which is necessary in order to start the container, right? Because it's creating a new file system in the mount namespace. So if you've dropped caps, you can't do that. You can't start containers. And if you try to re-add that cap, you're adding a cap named cap sysadmin, which is like a catch-all for like 50 different things, which is what it means to run a privileged container. It's exactly the same thing. So once you've re-added the cap that you need, you're a privileged container again. So there you go.
Docker inside LXC. Then you have sibling Dockers.
Yeah. You do Docker horizontally, and you do LXC vertically.
So LXC means canonical.
It's system containers versus app containers. Right. It's the conceptual demarcation point.
But so when you use LXC, you pretty much Ubuntu, right? Okay. Right.
You can do it with LXD too, but LXD has all kinds of other issues. But
yeah, LXD goes a little too deep into kernel boundary.
I have a list of things this long that I just emailed to Mark Shuttleworth this morning, like literally this morning. He wrote back, here's the engineer that's going to work on that stuff. But yes, it's busted. All right, let's start wrapping up. I'm going to check to see if the keg's empty.
Yeah, hey, so you were going to raffle? Did you raffle stuff?
Let's raffle. All right.
Okay.
So here are my prizes.
I've got, oh boy, 3 prizes. Oh baby.
Selfie stand.
Oh, but first,
Can you still add
but first, thank you, Adrian, for putting on an awesome. It's the best 4-year-old birthday party I've ever been to.
Yeah.
So if you want to enter the drawing, there's some time to put your name on the card.
Can write second time?
Yeah. Enter early and often.
Yeah.
Distracted.
See? There you go.
You know, because
You want me to cut? Huh?
split. You next Wednesday, if you find yourself.
Huh?
Find yourself up on the other side of St. Paul.
Yeah.
Next Wednesday.
Yeah. Roma. It's a good crowd. I love that crowd.
Good crowd. Spry.
Witty.
Witty too. Loud. Loud is a word that I would describe.
Any more entries into the drawing? It's not too late. If you want to get in. All in, we're gonna win.
All right. So we have a total of 6 prizes.
Woo! I like them odds.
The first 2 prizes are 100% off full access pass to DockerCon in Austin.
Oh. Ooh, ah.
I have
Sorry, I missed that. What was that?
Great. Free and transfer full pass to DockerCon in Austin.
So cool.
All right, I have two of this. I have two 50% off DockerCon. I've got two Information System Security Association Los Angeles passes and 20% off for everyone. And if you don't win, you still get 30% off of DockerCon registration by using D-Day4 as your discount code. All right, so everyone's a winner. Everyone gets a card.
Yay, I'll win.
All right. Here's how we do this. I need somebody who's not participating in the drawing. Anyone not signed up for the drawing?
Someone wants to be the drawer.
Okay.
Thank you.
So shuffle these up, fan them out, and I'll start pulling them out.
So like it gets like 100% care, you get like 140%.
There you go.
Means you have to pay back.
I wouldn't mind going to Austin, for sure.
That does not.
Right. First winner is Eddie.
Eddie! Hey! What's up, Eddie?
You have a choice. You can either have a full access pass to DockerCon in Austin or free admission to ISSA-LA.
I'm looking at those ones.
So DockerCon is
April.
Yeah.
In Austin.
In Austin,
Southwest flies, it's cheap.
near 6th Street.
Beautiful weather.
Take care of you guys.
I'll go to DockerCon. All right.
Yeah. Yes.
I will give you your code for you.
Awesome.
Woo, winner.
Next winner is Carl Mullins.
Hey, Carl.
Carl.
Nice.
Yes. You have mail. Will you be going to DockerCon or ISSA-LA?
I have cats, and I'm so tired to them, and I'm going to pass.
You pass, okay.
And I know that everyone else gets.
Well,
But you can go to the other
ISSLA
one.
is in town.
I know that, but it's all good. Thank you. And I have a
Well,
class
hey, at
today.
least you made
And I
it
got
here.
class.
ISSA
Winner.
is in
When is that?
Universal City.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I've been.
May 18th and 19th.
Thank you, though. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Chimpy. Come on down. What prize would you like?
They were all conference pass things.
Yeah, DockerCon or Information System Security Association Conference in Universal City.
I guess.
DockerCon and Austin. I'll give you a code for you. Okay. Next winner is Ruben.
Hey, it's me.
Hey!
That's a great name. You pronounce it for me?
Ruben.
Yeah.
Okay, you know, it could be Ruben.
Yeah.
Like local people say Ruben.
How do you pronounce the last
Papuya.
Sorry, I didn't get it right. Okay. What will you be having?
I
Either
think I'll go to
security conference. All right. So here's what you do. You email. Actually, I will email on your behalf. So just put your email address here, and I'll make sure you get the address. Our next winner is Scott Francis. You get a choice of either 50% off DockerCon or free admission to ISSA-LA. Happening May 18th or 19th. 18th and 19th in Universal City.
Oh.
Let me,
Used to be one day.
like 5 minutes.
It's 2 days.
I asked about DockerCon a while back, and I can't remember when I was out.
I'll make sure you're
Well, now we got a pass. So.
Right, dude, road trip.
You got half a pass.
Austin.
So the last winner.
When everybody else saw.
Well, I've got 2 more winners. Okay, so it's Mickey Jackson. Mickey Jackson.
Iggy.
Hey. 50% off Docker. I almost said Docker.
I'll take that.
For free admission to ISSA-LA.
I don't actually know what that is, so I'll look it back.
Okay. Okay, stay with me and I'll get back to you before you leave. All right, so I've got one last one. This is the last admission to ISSA-LA. Yep, Jordan.
Yes!
No, that doesn't count.
Yes, this is, and by the way, he loves that comment. This is the second time I've won a pass to ISSA-LA. Last time was in an OWASP meet 3 years ago. I'm in.
And he's totally going.
What do I need you? What do you need me to do?
Right,
Just let me know where you want me to email the coach to.
Oh, we got an email from Greg Dillon. You need that with my
Send it.
Verizon.
Okay, I'll send it.
Thank you.
Jordan.
Woohoo! Oh, and I have some photos. I got
Thank you for
I have photos
organizing,
of tonight's
Jordan.
event. Huh?
Thank you for getting that
Yeah,
thing
Jordan.
going.
Hey, Jordan. And by the way, yeah. Thanks to all of our sponsors, right? Docker for the awesome cake.
Yes.
And the banner and all that good stuff.
Yep.
Verizon Digital Media Services for hosting the event, the beer. There was a round of pizza, but everybody ate it. So, but the intense conversation in the round table well outweighs the weight you would gain from eating those couple slices of carne. There may be some chicken wings back there. And then also we have a UUASC meeting coming up Thursday, April 6th on salt, and then Thursday, May 4th on the effects of automation and mallet too. So, and once again, thank you, Adrian. Very awesome. 4 hours. He's been chatting Docker for 4 hours straight. This guy is a machine.
So, should I draw another, or are you going to take the 50 off? All right.
Nice.
Congratulations.
You can go to New Mexico and then come back.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming, hanging out.
All right, all the winners, I'm going to give you your codes now. Except for the ISSA-LA ones, I'm going to email you.
Thanks for coming, and please leave. Let's start clearing people out. You can take food with you. That's on that table.
Yes, take food, please.
That's on that table.
What else can we take?
No, that's it. That's
Monitors.
why
Monitors. Can we take those?
That's why I.
This projector.
That's why I.